Okay, we're live.
All right. Like we never left.
Right. Gosh, I feel so bad. It happens.
So just when things are like out of sort, you're out of your element here, Phil. You're out of your routine with Matt being
Well,
gone.
I'm out of my routine of relying on Matt Baker. Oh, thank God someone's here. What's up?
Here we
Fat
go.
Bug, welcome. I don't know. Did you have the notes there? I worried that I made you panic because you don't have the notes in front of you.
No, I'm good. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So lots of wind down topics there to talk about. We didn't even touch on Bloom, so we can really spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
interesting.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say the Blum stuff's interesting in context of the Nerwinski kind of working his way back in too, because I think you have two players who are in a similar position of like having a lot of time last year, maybe having players brought in to not necessarily replace them, but players to like fight for those spots. And then you have one player who, was asking to go down to City 2 to, figure things out. But then also the difference between Blom and Nerwinski of a player who, is very much away from home in Jabu Blom and like returning back to Kaiser Chiefs, returning back home, I think is, just to find himself again, I think will be nice.
I agree. And I hope it works for him. I hope he's happy. That's like, I keep thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to grab a beer. I'll be right back and we'll kick in.
Sounds good. Seeing chat roll by. I miss seeing chat. Stu, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
Oh, no. Oh, shoot. I don't even know if I remember. But yeah, good to see people in the chat again. Yeah, we did record the 550 portion, but I don't think we had that link posted. So everyone will have to listen to the silky smooth voice of Justin a little bit tomorrow or whenever this goes live. But no, it's man, yeah, a lot of interesting things going on. And yeah, well, Phil's going to talk about it later, but that Tim Twellman teaser is going to be an interesting video to watch. That's tomorrow afternoon, right?
Yeah, I saw the teaser go out. I'm always interested in that conversation. Especially from Taylor and like his era of MLS, I think is so interesting too.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about a lot of questions on Taylor, and I think it was the 2006 World Cup that he missed out on, didn't make the roster. Man, yeah. What could have been.
Yeah.
Concussions really were not kind to him.
No, and like, yeah, I obviously see from his Golden Boot season, like, man, what could have been? What could have been? We don't need to dwell on it, but what could have been? Oh, I think Phil's frozen.
Yeah, not been a great day for Phil today, as far as technology. Well, screw it. This is our wind down. I do not have a beer to pop right now. I'm actually drinking a nice Heineken 00 non-alcoholic tonight. So figured I would take it easy tonight. Justin, are you drinking anything? You have a camera on, so
yeah, I just got sparkling water. That's all. Nothing fancy. I woke up from a nap because like today during the days I watch our little one, and then like Claire and Lily went to her sister's house because we're about to head to KC for the weekend for the U.S. national team game. And yeah, I took a nap. I woke up for the podcast, and I need to wake up a little bit before I get into some beer drinking.
Yeah, and Amy, Phil was not drinking a beer for the original portion. But Justin, I don't know if we were live yet when we were talking about Bloom. If you want to go into kind of that loan to Kaiser Chiefs, and I know there was some talk going on a little bit behind the scenes before that loan was made public. There were some rumors flying around, so
Yeah, I think
Tell me what you heard
it's
before and what you think.
I think it's good to see, players kind of getting a say in where they go. I think you've seen from a couple of these moves they made with kind of moving players on or finding, scenarios for players to go play. Like, I think if there's any scenario that makes you happy for Jabu Leblanc to be kind of not off the team, but away from the team, is to go back to Kaiser Chiefs, where they love him down there. A lot of people in my mentions happy to have Jabu LeBlanc back. And I think just with the season he's had of, Chris Durkin comes in and takes that starting job by the horns, and we're in a double pivot situation where Edward Levin is back in that double pivot, not playing with two defensively minded CMs. So playing time for Jabu LeBlanc hasn't necessarily been there, and I think you saw that frustration play out. And in the case of, Jake Nerwinski, John Hackworth talked about how like Nerwinski went to him asking, how he can get playing time, went down to City 2 and like worked his way back in through some things he saw in training. And I think it's a different scenario for Jabu LeBlanc, because not only are things not working out with playing time, you're not getting the chances maybe you feel like you deserve, but you're also like halfway across the world from home. I think he talked about it a lot last year when he came to St. Louis for the first time. Like, this is the first time that he's ever been away from his home, and to be in a place like St. Louis that like is pretty culturally different from where he's from in South Africa. I'm just happy that he's able to go home, and maybe that's finding himself a little bit. He's there for the entire season for Kaiser Chiefs. St. Louis still own his rights. He still has that option to come back. And like, I guess the best case scenario for everyone will be for him to find himself in South Africa again. And I think he's still on the radar for their national team as well. So that's a little bit easier when you're in South Africa, because you're not making that round trip flight that like every time he did it in St. Louis, it felt like there was like a couple weeks of catching back up. So hopefully he kind of finds his footing there as well.
Yeah, I think the only other Bafana player in MLS is Bongi in Minnesota. But yeah, Bloom. That also highlights kind of how life comes at you fast in this sport. A year ago, there were rumors firing up about some European clubs, Premier League clubs even, which pretty remarkable, were tracking Bloom. And now, he lost his starting job in MLS and he's back in South Africa. So all the best to him. And it'll be hopefully nice to not have a bunch of angry comments on every city social media post going forward on where he is, because he is back home with Kaiser Chiefs.
That's a good point, too. I think like that probably speaks to why St. Louis want to hold on to his rights a little bit too, because there is a good player there, and he just like can't see it when he's not having playing time. So they hold on to his rights. So even if it doesn't necessarily mean that he's coming back to St. Louis, they at least, if that interest from those European clubs are still there and he goes back to the South African League, is playing kind of at a more elevated level, I think you could see a scenario where instead of coming back to St. Louis, he's moved on to Europe. But like, I like Jabu LeBlanc a lot. I like what he brings from he's such a good ball stopper, like to the point where, there are times last year where anyone in his vicinity and he just like wind up with the ball somehow. And, I like watching him battle with players. There's a battle earlier this year between when RSL were in town, and him and Diego Luna were going back and forth, and that was fascinating. So I hope he makes his way back, but like, I think it's a good move for him.
Yeah, and if nothing else, we'll always have that banger in Minnesota last year.
MLS goal of the week, don't you forget.
Oh yeah, that was so much fun. Yeah. And some other developments that they had during the transfer window was, I guess they didn't. To be honest, I was under a rock for a little bit, but the Josh Sargent rumors, and there were other rumors that floated up after the window that Cincinnati hasn't given up on signing him. St. Louis owns his MLS rights, but that doesn't mean necessarily that we would have him if an offer comes through.
They also turned down like a $30 million offer like just last year or last week. So like, yeah, and if Cincinnati wants to go for it, it's going to take quite a payday though to track him out.
Yeah, I mean, for them, they sold, loaned John Rowe to Marseille, and they sold Ida to Celtic. So Norwich, I don't think is keen
Yeah.
on giving up Sargent very
No.
easily.
And I think like, yeah, and I don't think Sargent, just from putting my like U.S. soccer hat on, like I don't think you want him going anywhere that isn't the Premier League or like La Liga team or something that is a clear step up. And I think it's obvious that there are Premier League guys on him, obviously, and like he's doing well in Norwich. He obviously feels very comfortable there. So like unless he's making that forward move, that progression move, like I don't see him coming back to MLS as much as I would love to be able to cover him closely.
Yeah, well, I think someday he'll make it back here, but that's for him.
Yeah.
It's always going to be a fallback option, and might as well push yourself one way or another. If he performs this year, he'll be with a Premier League team next year. I'm confident on that. Josh Biggs in the comments mentioned that Minnesota United was our last road win, which is absolutely insane to think about because that would have been September of last year. I know we haven't won this year, but for some reason I thought we might have nicked another one.
Yeah, once August rolled around, there's not much hope going on. And then, you convince yourself that like, okay, well, that's just the end of the season. They kind of had it wrapped up. And then, what happened in the playoffs happened.
Yeah, we did coast.
Yeah. Stewart asked, what can I explain what I see in Blom? And I think like the difference between this year and last year is important to note. And if you watch his games last season, like you're seeing a player that does have a little more connectivity outside of his defensive play as well. And this season, that aspect of his game, kind of disintegrated in terms of what he can bring on the ball. And he still had those good defensive numbers. But like the reason that he, lost the job to Durkin, not necessarily lost the job, but, wasn't able to push Durkin for more minutes is because that Durkin is so much better on the ball this year. And like, the hope is that he can go back somewhere where he's comfortable, kind of like find that comfortability again, where you're not, thinking so hard and things come a little more natural. And like the defensive side, you see that that's not going away, but it's what you can do on the ball as a midfielder in a team that, wants to progress the ball quickly. That's important too.
Yeah, and I saw online some people were talking about, well, one person in particular was talking about how JGR coming in, and we brought him in. Everyone thought he was going to be a center back, and now he's kind of finding himself more in that central defensive midfield role off the bench, and that was kind of a not death knell, but a nail in the coffin that Bloom really didn't have a spot in the lineup at this time. What do you think about where JGR fits in compared to Bloom?
Yeah, I think he definitely gives you options, and he's a player that has size. And yeah, I think I don't think I'm sold on him being a defensive midfielder over a center back. I think I just like what he brings to the table as a center back so much. But from like the little bit that we've seen him from kind of his numbers in the Australian League, but yeah, like he's looked good at that double pivot spot as well in his kind of short stints. And obviously, I think Hackworth values what he brings coming in late in games to kind of just be no nonsense and like calm on the ball. I think is an important thing too, where he clearly is not shaken by coming in and playing those big minutes and close out games so far. Like I've liked what I've seen from him so far, but he's still young. He still has a lot of growing to do, and I think next season he's going to play a decent role, and I think you just want to see him. I don't know if it's center back or defensive mid though. Like I think, like to me, seeing what he did in Australia last year as a center back, like I think that's what kind of gets him on your radar, on Lutz's radar to come in. Like I think that's where his future is, but like he's looked good in those midfield minutes as well. Like I'm hedging here, Stu. I'm hedging.
Well, he came in with a reputation from A-League as a little hot-headed and reckless tackling, and a little bit of a walking red card. And I haven't seen that.
Yeah, and I think like being a young player too, and like obviously he's playing more minutes in the A League than he has here, but like you kind of expect that from young center backs being pushed into that role.
Yeah, you're gonna maybe commit to a tackle that you wouldn't otherwise when you get a little older. You're head on straight. But love the enthusiasm. Welcome back, Phil. How are you doing? How's your
Could be better.
internet?
I think at least 5 to 10 things have gone wrong over the course of the last hour and a half, but I think it's all fixed now. Thanks
Sound
for
good.
waiting on me. Sorry about that.
Crystal clear.
I missed some talk about like Blom and what else? Did we move on from Blom?
Phil, I would love to know kind of what you think. And I was just saying that, like, I think if anything, like him going back to Kaiser Chiefs is kind of the ideal situation where St. Louis still have his rights. So, either he comes back to St. Louis or, those teams that were originally interested in him from a European standpoint are still interested in him. But like, I'm excited for him to go get some minutes in a place where he feels comfortable.
Yeah. You were saying that off air and I still think like, I hope he's happy. You know what I mean? I hope he figures out what he wants and what's good for him. It reminds me of Jensen, actually, the most, Isak Jensen, who didn't seem to be comfortable here. And it felt like Blom never really felt super comfortable here. Neither one of them got what they wanted, I think, from the transfer to St. Louis. And Jensen went back to Denmark and thrived, right? And now he's there permanently. Blom is going back. I think he'll thrive. And he knows what he needs to work on. He knows, I think there's a list of things that they send him back there. Like, hey, you can dominate this South African league. They love you there. They know how to use you, but add these things to your game and come back ready to work hard and earn another role here. And to do that, St. Louis had to trigger the option, right? Like we had to make sure we pay him for an extra season, minus whatever loan money we're getting from Kaiser Chiefs. So I hope he comes back. I'm with you, Justin. I love that. I hope he gets better, improves on some of the things that, Durkin has been able to walk in here and do right off the bat, and comes back better for it. There's a couple things that I think about with Blom that I think people don't recognize for Durkin. Like Durkin, when he came in, all of a sudden Leuven wasn't being demanded to get the ball from the center backs. Leuven would have to get the ball from the center backs, get it to someone else, move forward and get the ball again. If Blom was in the game, because Blom would get the ball and typically pass it sideways or backward again. That's over and over. I feel like that's what would happen. And the second Durkin came in, it felt like all of a sudden we had a midfield rotation. Like Durkin could come back, get the ball, make a couple people miss. Even one person missing on the way to getting the ball to Leuven is a massive help to our midfield. And I feel like building out of the back has been so much better this year, just based on that alone. And there isn't much lost between Durkin and Blom defensively. I do think there's a drop off. I think Blom's incredible at defending, but so I'm really happy with what Durkin's been able to do. I think Blom can improve on that. I think he's capable of improving on that. I think we've seen him become a better passer through the last season, but he needs to get better at that. And then on top of that, how can St. Louis use Blom better? I do feel like if we're going to sit back and defend some of these games, who's better at that than Blom? And it was the game that he was gone that we tried to do that to a fault. And we failed at it, and it would have been nice to have Blom there for that. So I don't know. That's a lot to kind of talk and think about, but I don't know what you guys think about Blom and Durkin and all those stuff.
The Durkin shout is good, Phil, because I think just kind of moving forward and always looking for those options that Blom just doesn't necessarily have in his toolbox at this point.
Stu, don't you think someone out there could use Blom as he is now? You know what I mean? In the starting 11?
Absolutely, but I think he's needed in South Africa to just kind of reset, and they love him there. And Justin and I talked a little bit about that earlier. While you were off, no, it's you were off in the ether a little bit, but
We could hear you.
he's a useful player, and he'll come back better, and maybe not with St. Louis, but whatever team he plays for next after Kaiser Chiefs, or maybe wraps up his career there. I think he'll improve.
Agree. I wanted to talk about City. This happened today. Justin, I saw you tweet it first that St. Louis City adds a U14 and a U18 team to the academy. Why don't you tell us what you gathered from that at least?
Yeah, I think it's such a good, well, to go with the U18 route, because those players were playing in the UPSL before this, and that was something when I talked to Dale Schilly before the season that he wanted those guys with where they were to play, because a lot of those guys were going on to, the college ranks, wanting them to be playing against adults and just kind of feel that physicality. And now transitioning away from a group of players that you haven't necessarily been developing, but you've been putting the finishing touches on to kind of like usher them into their like pro career. But now you kind of see this switch of, okay, we're going to, we have things in place at the 16, 15, 17 level. So like U18s, we can go. We need our kind of young, talented players that we've developed, usher them into that MLS next ecosystem. And then with the U14s, it's just getting players younger in your system, being able to mold them in kind of what you see as your city principle and ideals. And I think that's important for the next step of this academy, where now you are maybe starting to see their identity versus players that were previously developed at, Scott Gallagher, JB Marie, Lou Fuse, what have you, that these great academies that we have in the St. Louis area, but City only putting the finishing touches on them versus having their hand in the rest of their development.
Stu, how do you feel about this in the landscape? Because I do think there's like a dark side to this. I don't know if you want to touch on it. I will for sure if you don't, but I figured you would kind of have your finger on the pulse of that as well.
I mean, I think adding the U14s was obviously intentional, but I know there are, well, by reputation, the Gallagher U14s coming up are quite skilled. So I don't know if this was added for that reason, or, I mean, obviously this is a longer term revamp and approach to the academy process. U18 is always an interesting one to me just because of how it sits kind of awkwardly. And Justin, you talked to that a little bit on the college aspect. I mean, I don't think more teams is worse. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I agree.
Though, I just know, like, sorry to interrupt you, Stu. Like, so my cousin was in the academy, and like that transition from the 16 to 17 to like 18 range before they had that 18 team really like ready to go was awkward. So like having those age groups for all those players to progress through is important. But yes, Stu, go ahead.
Makes sense. But well, yeah, what were you saying there, Stu? Like getting them in earlier and
I don't know if City has officially changed their kind of approach from a heavy press academy style to more possession based. I know there are rumors that the club was going to move that way. Justin, I don't know if you've heard anything about that or seen anything about that, but that would kind of line up more with the at least the Gallagher approach, and maybe be a sign of how the club is shifting an overall philosophy for the future. Well, I think we've already seen a shift away from energy drink soccer, but we'll see how this kind of flows years down the line. It could just be it's a more, not a more, well, it is a more enjoyable way to watch soccer than energy drink soccer.
I think you
philosophy.
kind of see it with kind of what Hackworth brings and what like Bobby Murphy's City 2 teams do, where it's like these teams that will press and they have obvious pressing triggers and they will be like intense, but they are comfortable on the ball and they're comfortable sitting off in moments as well, where it's not always like constant. We're going to press, we got to press, we got to press, we got to win that second ball. We got to like use our press as a playmaker, but now you're pressing your key moments where you can maybe force a turnover, but you can serve, you sit back in moments where it's going to help you as well. And like, you're not necessarily looking to just constantly play the ball forward. I think that's to speak a little bit to that too, of that obvious kind of transition away from that like Red Bull energy drink style. It's definitely been different. I felt it once Hackworth took over has taken over as well.
I think that's what I was getting at earlier when we were reading Hackworth's quotes, is like the way he preps is like, it's so we're still pressing really well. Like passes per defensive action is still like holding steady at, what was it? Like 2.7 passes. I'm going to mess it up. Actually, hold on. I want to get it right. Here we go. STL 10.5, right? And New England is like 13.5 passes every time before they are defending the ball. So anyway, it's holding steady, and it just feels like Hackworth is giving like his thought process, like how are we going to break them down, because we know how to press. It just feels like City got the pressing thing down, figured it out, and that's always like go to. We're always going to do that. That's our identity. But also we're going to work every week to figure out how to break down the other team with our attack. And that feels very different to Carnell being like, no, we have an identity. We press like the Dickens, and that's how we win. Like we get the turnovers and that's how we score. Like that's our playmaking too. And so, I think there's definitely a shift. And I love that this is where our conversation's gone, because like you look at what Scott Gallagher's done over the years, it was possession, possession, possession. You look at Red Bull energy drink soccer, and it's like what we just said, what Carnell maybe felt like. I don't know whether it is true or not. And then like, I think what we're settling into is somewhere in the middle, because you read about youth development. I love it. They just said this about how Barcelona looks at, that kid, Yamine, I forgot his last name, that 17-year-old for Barcelona that did so well with Spain in the Euros. They talk about how they raise these kids to like have the proper style of play, to play the game right, and they don't worry about their physical stature. They're like, each player is going to know how to play the Barcelona style. And then if that person happens to be a 6'4", 180-pound guy, or he happens to be a 5'8", 160-pound guy, like we'll work with whatever that is. As long as they have these traits, we can put them in the game, and they can become good, whether they're huge or small. And so I love that thought process. And I think training a kid to press is a lot easier than training a kid to break down a team in the final third. All that to say that basically is I think we can focus on breaking down other teams after we've just made pressing second nature. And maybe that's what the academy's doing too.
Yeah, like more of a pragmatic approach, I think. And like, not necessarily saying we're going to play in our opponent's style, but we're going to take their style into consideration when we design our game plan. Versus, like you said, with Carnell, it was kind of, you were going to, be that heavy pressing team regardless of who you're playing against. And like you saw it at the end of last year of how it, kind of came crashing down with just teams giving them the ball and, seeing them try to do something with it.
I think the scary thing too, Stu, I'll throw to you on this one after I kind of say a little bit, but like, I think there was this worry for me, like one being, Justin, maybe, like the UPSL teams or the MLS UPSL teams are disappearing. That was really a sad thing for me if that is part of this announcement, because it sounds like MLS said no to UPSL in the future. So maybe this U18 team is going to replace that UPSL team that's been so much
I don't know, because then
fun.
I saw FC Dallas are moving their U23 team to the
14 team. I think at some point City drew a line and they were like, like we said, we're going to rely on the other amazing academies to develop players, and then we'll take over at 16 or 15 or whatever.
Yeah,
it
and
was.
I will say that I think it's always
It's
been the
expanding.
plan to like eventually have like all those academy group like age groups solidified. I think it's like an MLS, edict at that point. But like, yeah, just to get your feet underneath you and like when are you gonna put in those lower age groups? I think has always been up in the air.
Yeah. So I don't know if that bothers you at all, Stu. The landscape of youth soccer in St. Louis seems to all be getting along these days. So I don't. Maybe there's no story here, but it's just something I kind of keep an eye on. What do you think, Stu?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't have a kid in Gallagher or anything like that, so I'm sure there's still tension behind the scenes. But yeah, I mean, I'm pretty pleased with how everyone's playing nice, at least from the outside. And oh, sorry, I just muted myself that whole time.
No, we heard you. You said and then you muted. So keep going.
League of Clubs. Did you guys hear that?
That's what the new. Yes.
Yeah. Or League 4 clubs. Yeah, and I think that's where all the old UPSL guys are going to. And it is sad also because I think NPSL is kind of imploding on itself, but they're doing that to themselves a little bit. But we could talk a lot about NPSL later at a different time. And the local clubs we have here, we're blessed with a lot of local amateur soccer clubs that we can watch in May and June of every year. But no, I'm rambling. I don't really have anything else on the U14, U18s, to be honest.
I just saw while I was rambling, I saw you need to go. So should we let you go here, Stu?
Yeah, I'm going to drop off. But the last thing I just wanted to mention, a couple St. Louis connections or local connections. Matt Polster, who is a long-standing player for New England. Well, he played for Chicago Fire, and now he's playing for New England. He went to SIUE, so
I forget.
It's always interesting when he comes back to town. And also, this is the final year of eligibility for Lori Chalupny for the National Soccer Hall of Fame. So she made the list of finalists. It's probably doubtful she'll make it through, but still obviously an honor to make it to the finalists for a few years like she has.
Well said. Thanks, Stu.
So, go City.
Go City.
Always a pleasure talking to you guys.
You too, man.
Talking to
Have
you
a good night.
You too.
Okay. I do want to touch on one or two more things. Jackson Delkus did you realize that Jackson Delkus is the #1 ranked player in NCAA soccer, men's soccer?
No, but I did know that he was at SLU, and like he impressed when I watched, you're watching that U17 team last year, and they're on like, I thought that Jackson Delkus is a player that they, has next level potential, and like being in that SLU program, I think that's a good little spot for him. I did not realize that he was the #1 recruit until I saw that article come out. I was like, oh, okay.
And he was one of those guys, speaking of the UPSL team, like he was one of those guys playing like 40-year-olds in that UPSL
did not
final.
look that out of place with his size at all. Yeah.
Not at all. Yeah. And when I think about like kids that stood out the very first year of the academy, we were going to as many games as we could. And so I saw a lot of Jackson Delkus in the first year, and I was like, well, this kid's clearly going to be one of our top academy players. And he was like tall and lanky. Now I'm looking at this picture of him in a SLU uniform. He's tall, lanky, but strong. and in that UPSL final I was just talking about, boy, he was just like, he's fast, he's relentless, he's gonna fit in so well in the NCAA, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if he ends up in the super draft in a few years.
That's definitely a player to keep an eye on, because I like seeing how he develops. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they try to like bring him back into the city fold at some point before he gets there, obviously to the super draft. You don't want to lose these kids to the super draft.
True.
But yeah, I'm very excited because like I think he like you said, I think he fits in so well with that SLU style of play. And like, he's just a spark plug of a player, and like he has the physical tools, it seems like, too. So like I don't know, like when I watch him, like obviously he seems like a player with next level potential, but I don't know enough about the players coming into this rookie class to call him the number one recruit. But like, yeah, Kevin Kalish just put together a pretty good recruiting class this year. That was a big hype for what he's done there.
Yeah. And we are just so lucky to have Kevin. I will sing his praises until the end of time. Like what SLU looked like before he took over versus what it is now. Like I am so proud of how many local kids are on that team. And this is one of my favorite things is like the opportunity to get them back at some point, to send them from the academy to SLU and perhaps bring them back ahead of the draft. Well said there. Would be really amazing. And Jackson Delkus to me is one of the top players for that. We got Johnny Klein in a different path, but still like I'm so proud that we've brought some of these guys in, and I hope it keeps happening for the
it seems like it's
foreseeable future.
There's definitely like a line of communication there between like Kevin Kalish and John Hackworth. I know that they talk relatively frequently, so I'm sure tabs are being kept. In the Bronze Beat this weekend at City Park, a lot of St. Louis representation there. Like both SIU and SLU do a great job of recruiting these local players and just keeping them here to showcase that.
Yeah. I think the last thing I want to talk about is I would say Jackson Delkus, not terribly unlike McSorley, maybe not in stature, but in, being relentless, having the physical tools. McSorley's finishing has looked really good as late. And so City 2, they clinched the playoffs already. They're looking incredible. I think they're first in the West. And I
think they might be tied with North Texas now, but yeah, they're like right there on top. And like attack-wise, they've looked very good. Mekhi Joyner, of course, he's second in the Golden Boot race now, which is awesome. And then Caden Glover's looked very good since going back down the past few games. So, like, there's a lot to like when you watch those games. McSorley, Hackworth actually called him out today in his press conference, like calling out his finishing, saying that the game last weekend was the best game we've seen from him, and like saying that he is going to, fight for a spot next year probably. So, worth watching, worth paying attention to.
Yes. And I love that you mentioned Glover. Obviously Klein, we've seen Mekhi come on this year. I think Glover was like the missing piece because I think McSorley is like consummate professional coming out of college. It's just like he's going to be doing his thing every game. He learned the system. He plays his part. And he's going to take some shots, and they're always going to seemingly be dangerous. Every week they seem to get more and more dangerous, these crazy shots he's pulling off. But, adding Glover in that last piece, it looked like he was kind of dropping in and playing a 10 at times. And so he's doing some playmaking, and I think he's doing really well. I think one of those McSorley goals was Glover holding the ball up, drawing some defenders, and then sending it over to McSorley, who scored the goal in space. So it was nice. If it wasn't a goal, it was like a shot on goal that was like very nearly in. So
yeah, Glover had a goal in Minnesota a few weeks back where he like essentially just bullied the center back off the ball and then like created the play himself. Like, yeah, he's looked very good at that level. I'm interested to see how this keeps going.
Me too. I want him to level up. I want him to figure out his level and take that, to MLS. It's going to take time, right? I mean, I don't think it's going to happen in the next year, but
like him and Joyner are still only 17. So like there's plenty of time left in that development.
Totally excited about that. So I just wanted to give you one last chance. Did you guys, I missed the Nerwinski talk and I was excited to talk about it.
Although we didn't really touch on it outside of kind of where, in the bomb conversation that goes. So like you didn't actually miss it.
Oh, great. Okay. Because I do want to talk about it. I love the way you phrased your article as kind of like Nerwinski understood the moment, right? Can you talk us through what you thought about that?
After the game, he kind of sat down and was very honest. I think that's probably a lot of the exhaustion of having a child on Thursday, playing a game on Sunday. But he opened up about not getting the chances that he felt like he deserved this year. And obviously we know Nerwinski is a pro. He's a veteran and he's on the leadership council. So he's a player who has a good head on his shoulders and obviously is willing to put in the work. And he just said that he feels like he hasn't had the opportunities that he feels like he deserves in training, and then obviously in the games as well. So when you're at this point in your career as an MLS veteran, you're looking to your next contract, and like he doesn't have a contract for next year. So coming into that game, it's kind of like understanding it as an opportunity that this is your moment to kind of prove that you still belong in this league. They can still be a starter, play important minutes somewhere, even if it's not in St. Louis.
Yeah, kind of like what I said about Blom, like where he could start on a lot of teams in MLS, like tomorrow, and so I think we wish the best for him, and he understood the moment, like you said, like he knew how big a game that was, and he performed perfectly. He did exactly what he was asked. He was up in the second half up against the guy that embarrassed, two left backs that aren't even on our team anymore in Paintsville. You know what I mean? And he's been there the whole time, and we've gone through these left backs, and Paintsville being probably the one that embarrassed them the most that I can think of.
I think with Jake, it's, you always know that defensively he's solid, but it's the offensive side of the game that like other fullbacks come in and look better than him. That's kind of what Twellman comes in and is able to press the ball forward, and it just like takes that job and runs with it. But Nerwinski had good balls forward in that game, staying at home, knowing that, he's not going to be asked to join the attack, but when he had the ball, he was able to play it forward, and he had some good progressive passes as well. So, just reminding people that he's there and is able to step in, I think is important.
Yeah. And honestly, I mentioned Kessler being one of the top G+ performers 2 games ago against Portland. Nerwinski was one of the top 2 for St. Louis in that Galaxy game. So, man, it's such a good thing. We have lots of competition in our team. That's something that's been highlighted the last several games, and it's so true. It's just that Totland is, and this is something I want to ask you about too. Like Totland was off to a hot start early in the season, and it feels like he's tapered off. And I don't know how much of that is him personally or just like the team in general. This kind of stuff happens, but didn't he look absolutely incredible earlier in this season?
Yeah. And I think like, you wonder how much of that is like the MLS schedule and, travel that you're not necessarily used to as a player in Europe, especially, playing for Haken where you're, traveling not that far distances for most of your matches. So like, I do wonder how much of that's just like the MLS season. And then I think competition is good. Like having guys challenge for your spot, when you start to get complacent, even the best players in the world start to get a little complacent. So like, hopefully having some rest and, having, knowing that your starting job isn't necessarily guaranteed, I think that maybe does him some good. But yeah, you're right, Phil. Like I made this point like after about 10 games where, you looked at his chart and he's just like, his progressive carries and progressive passes versus like anything that they had last year was so far and above beyond what they could bring to the table. And like, that's tapered off a lot over the past couple of months. So like you have to hope that you can find that again. And maybe it's as simple as a little bit of rest, maybe it's simple as a little bit of competition, but like, I think he's still a great player. Obviously.
Completely agree. Yeah. That's well said. Anything else you'd like to talk about before we go?
No, Phil, I think we've touched on about everything. I think.
How's your
internet holding up? How you doing?
Oh my God. As long as you can understand what I'm saying, I'm happy because that means I can use this audio tomorrow. I do want to apologize to everyone. What a mess tonight has been. Weren't able to stream the first half of the show. I dropped out, but thank you so much, Justin. Not only were you filling in for Matt and Santi both being gone tonight, you and Stu had to carry the entire show for a while I was gone. So thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Happy to be here. Happy to talk to the people again. Yeah, happy to be on.
Love it. All right. Well, of course, Justin Horniker, check him out on STL Mag. And of course, just follow him on X if you don't already.
I'm heading to KC tomorrow to cover the men's national team game here. So yeah, that's right. Follow me on Talking Soccer is my Substack right now.
Now all I want to do is yeah. See, now all I want to do is talk about the men's national team. We'll spare you for now, but yeah, we'll have to
bring for another hour. Yeah.
Oh, I know. It'd be bad. At least an hour. So yeah, check out Justin on Twitter for sure. And that's it from us tonight. Thanks for listening if you made it this far.